Solving your problems isn't our line.
How many of the 7 are still alive today? That question has haunted generations of movie lovers who once idolized the grim silhouettes riding across a Mexican desert in The Magnificent Seven. It wasn't just a Western. It was a revolution. The film took a Japanese classic and reloaded it into a gunmetal American fable, where 7 strangers stood between helpless villagers and a band of marauding killers. It was about courage, about redemption, about men with nothing left to lose, buying back their souls with bullets and blood. But what happened to the real men behind those guns? They were legends. Names like Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, Charles Bronson. Faces as rough as the frontier they roamed. But behind the stoic stares and cigarette smoke was a darker, quieter truth. Fame that burned too fast, battles with illness, and lives cut short by more than just time. Some vanished in silence, others in scandal. And as the years passed, the myth of the 7 grew, even as their bodies faded from this world. This isn't just a tribute. It's a reckoning. Because every great gunfight ends in stillness. And every screen legend has a final scene, one you didn't see in theaters. So saddle up. In this video, we'll ride back through time to revisit all 7 men who once stood tall against evil, and see how they truly fell. What did they gain? What did they lose? And who were they when the cameras stopped rolling? Stay with us, because this is the Magnificent 7, like you've never seen them before. Yel Briner, Chris Adams. He wasn't just the leader of the 7. He was the one who made silence speak. With a shaved head, a sharp stare, and an aura of regal command, Yul Brynner became the immovable pillar at the center of the Magnificent 7. Born Yul Brynner in Vladivostok in 1920, his life was a maze of myths, some told by others, many invented by himself. Sometimes he claimed to be Mongolian royalty, other times a half-Swiss samurai. The truth, as it turned out, was more grounded, but Brynner never cared for the grounded. When he stepped into the black outfit of Chris Adams in 1960, Brynner was already a star, an Oscar winner for The King and I, and a towering figure on both stage and screen. On set, he carried himself with gravity and precision. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His authority came from presence, a presence that could fill a scene even when he wasn't speaking. After The Magnificent 7, Brynner's career moved between epic films and endless stage revivals of The King and I, a role he embodied over 4,600 times. He became more than an actor. He was a symbol of discipline, intensity, and control. But behind the mystique, life took its toll. A lifelong smoker, Brynner was diagnosed with lung cancer in the early 1980s. When the end came, he faced it like a man who had long prepared for the curtain to fall. Before his death, he recorded a haunting public message. Now that I'm gone, I tell you, don't smoke. Whatever you do, just don't smoke. Yul Brynner died on October 10, 1985, at the age of 65. He was cremated and buried in the French countryside, far from the studios that once lit up his name. But his silhouette never left the screen. Chris Adams rode off at the end of the story. Yul Brynner never did. Steve McQueen, Vin Tanner. By the time he joined the Magnificent 7, Steve McQueen already had a fire in his eyes, the kind that couldn't be taught, only lived. Born Terrence Stephen McQueen in 1930, his early life was steeped in abandonment, reform schools, and restless survival. He carried that same edge into everything he did, on screen and off. At 30, cast as Vin Tanner, McQueen brought a smoldering intensity to the film, not through grand speeches, but through glances, gestures, and a simmering energy that lit up the frame. He didn't need to talk much. He just needed to be there. What made McQueen unforgettable wasn't just talent, it was instinct. In every scene, he understood what would draw the eye. A shift in posture, a subtle movement, the way a man touches his hat before a fight. That intuition became his trademark, and the Magnificent 7 became his launching pad. After it, the path ahead was explosive, The Great Escape, Bullet, The Thomas Crown Affair, Papillon. McQueen became the face of rebellion, a new kind of Hollywood hero. Cool, unpredictable, undeniably real. But that fire came with a cost. Behind the icon was a man chasing peace in a world that wouldn't let him rest. He battled isolation, and the pressures of fame with the same recklessness that made him famous. In 1979, a persistent cough revealed something worse: mesothelioma, a rare cancer linked to asbestos exposure. With few options in the US, McQueen turned to unconventional treatments in Mexico, clinging to hope as the disease spread. He passed away on November 7, 1980, at just 50 years old. No final roles, no grand farewell, just the silence of a legend gone too soon. But Steve McQueen never really needed an ending. He lived like every scene was his last, and in doing so, became eternal. James Coburn, Brit. He was the quiet one, the man with the knife, the icy gaze, and the presence that cut deeper than words ever could. In The Magnificent Seven, James Coburn didn't need dialogue. He had only 11 lines in the entire film, but his silence spoke volumes. His character, Brit, was the blade in the dark, the embodiment of precision and calm. And in many ways, that was Coburn himself. Born in 1928 in Nebraska, Coburn carried the windswept ruggedness of the Midwest in his bones. He studied acting seriously, first at UCLA, then in New York under the legendary Stella Adler, but he never lost that natural, understated grit. When director John Sturges cast him as Brit, it was a gamble. Coburn wasn't a household name yet, but Sturges saw something in him, a coiled tension, a lethal grace, and a smirk that suggested he knew more than he let on. The Magnificent Seven launched Coburn into the ranks of Hollywood's elite. He followed it with another iconic role in The Great Escape, once again with his now legendary co-stars. The 1960s and 70s were good to him. Spy spoofs, westerns, war films. He shared the screen with McQueen, Bronson, and Peckinpah, but he never faded into their shadows. Coburn had his own rhythm, cool, detached, dangerous in a quiet way. But behind the screen, pain stalked him. In the 1980s, rheumatoid arthritis began to consume his body. His hands twisted. His joints froze. He disappeared from the spotlight, not by choice, but by necessity. Doctors gave him pills. Nothing worked. For 20 years, he suffered in silence, until, miraculously, a holistic compound gave him back a measure of freedom. He returned to acting with fire in his belly, and in 1998, at age 70, won an Oscar for Affliction, playing an abusive father with such rawness it hurt to watch. On November 18, 2002, James Coburn died of a heart attack at his home while listening to music and playing the flute. No final scenes, no farewell speeches, just a quiet exit, precisely the way Brit might have gone. Charles Bronson, Bernardo O'Reilly. In a film full of stoic men and silent stares, Charles Bronson stood out by saying the least and meaning the most. As Bernardo O'Reilly, the half-Irish, half-Mexican gunfighter with a soft spot for children and a gun always within reach, Bronson brought a quiet soulfulness to the Magnificent Seven. But in real life, the man behind the role was carved from even harder stone. Born Charles Dennis Buchinski in a Pennsylvania mining town in 1921, he was the 11th of 15 children in a struggling Lithuanian-American family. By 16, he was deep in the coal mines, earning $1 for every ton of coal he could shovel. The darkness of that world followed him, literally and emotionally. It gave him a fear of enclosed spaces and a rage against poverty that would fuel his rise. After serving as a bomber tail gunner in World War II and earning a Purple Heart, Bronson used the GI Bill to study art and acting. But Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with him. His face was too rugged, his accent too harsh. He wasn't suave. He wasn't polished. But what he had was presence, the kind that couldn't be faked. The Magnificent Seven gave him international exposure, but it was Europe that embraced him first. In France and Italy, he was a god. And when he returned to the US, he brought with him a new image, the hardened Avenger. Films like The Dirty Dozen, Mr. Matchstick, and above all, Death Wish transformed him into an American archetype. The man who didn't talk, didn't plead, didn't blink. He just pulled the trigger. Off-screen, he was a private man. He loved painting, music, and his wife Jill Ireland, with whom he made numerous films. But tragedy stalked them. Ireland died of cancer in 1990, and Bronson was never the same. In his final years, he battled Alzheimer's and multiple health complications. On August 30th, 2003, he died at the age of 81 from pneumonia and respiratory failure. Charles Bronson never smiled easily, never wasted words, but when he stepped into a scene, he owned it. He was the quiet storm in a world of noise. And when he left without a sound. Robert Vaughn Lee. Among the seven, he was the sharpest dressed, the most refined, the one who didn't quite look like he belonged in the dust and blood of a Mexican standoff. But that's exactly what made Robert Vaughn's character, Lee, so compelling. A fallen aristocrat with trembling hands and haunted eyes, Lee was a man running from the ghosts in his head. And Robert Vaughn knew exactly how to play that kind of role, because he understood what it meant to live between the lines. Born in New York City in 1932 to showbiz parents, Vaughn had both stage blood and intellect in his veins. He wasn't just a performer. He was a scholar, earning a PhD in communications and later publishing a book on Hollywood blacklisting. He could quote Shakespeare, challenge the House Un-American Activities Committee, and still deliver a line with the smooth menace of a seasoned gunfighter. At 28, Vaughn joined the Magnificent Seven as the last-minute replacement for another actor, and yet he fit into the ensemble like a final piece of a loaded revolver. His portrayal of Lee, a once proud gunslinger cracking under the weight of his own reputation, was nuanced and tragic. In a cast full of alpha energy and silent bravado, Vaughn brought vulnerability. And for those watching closely, it was unforgettable. While many of his co-stars chased action stardom, Vaughn carved his own path through television. His role as Napoleon Solo in The Man from UNCLE made him a global icon in the 1960s. He became a staple of American pop culture, floating effortlessly between big-screen thrillers like Bullet and small-screen dramas, all while keeping one foot in the world of academia and politics. He acted steadily for 5 decades, never fading, always working. But in 2016, just shy of his 84th birthday, Vaughn succumbed to acute leukemia. Quietly, gracefully, as if he'd slipped out of the scene before anyone realized he was gone. Robert Vaughn was the last of the seven to pass. And in that final silence, the myth was complete. The circle closed. Horsebook Holtz, Chico. He was the youngest of the seven, and he played it like wildfire. Impulsive, cocky, romantic to a fault. As Chico, the hot-headed farm boy desperate to prove himself, Horst Buchholz brought a kinetic energy to the Magnificent Seven that none of the others did. He wasn't just fighting bandits, he was fighting to matter. And in many ways, so was the actor behind the role. Born in Berlin in 1933, Buchholz survived World War II as a child refugee, spending time in foster care in Czechoslovakia before returning to a shattered Germany. He dropped out of school to pursue acting, and by the 1950s, he had become a star of post-war German cinema. With matinee idol looks and a reputation as the German James Dean, Buchholz was Europe's rising flame. He burned fast, and he burned bright. The Magnificent Seven was his American breakthrough. Though relatively unknown in the US, he held his own alongside giants like Brynner and McQueen. His Chico was impulsive but endearing, a boy among men, armed with bravado and desperation. His energy counterbalanced the stoicism of his co-stars, and his character arc, transforming from restless youth to protector of the village, gave the film its beating heart. Buchholz's career after the Magnificent Seven was filled with promise and near misses. He starred in Billy Wilder's 1, 2, 3, nearly landed the role of Sharif Ali in Lawrence of Arabia, and became a multilingual star across Europe. But unlike his co-stars, he never found a permanent place in Hollywood. He drifted between countries, films, and genres, brilliant in bursts, but never quite at the center. Later in life, he found renewed acclaim with a quiet supporting role in Life is Beautiful, 1997, a reminder of the soulful depth that never left him. But illness came suddenly. In 2003, while recovering from a broken thigh bone, he contracted pneumonia. Horst Buchholz died in Berlin, the city where his journey began, at the age of 69. Of all the seven, Chico was the one who stayed behind, not just in the village, but in memory. Young, eager, and unfinished, just like the man who played him. Brad Dexter, Harry Luck. In a cast of icons, Brad Dexter was the one most people forget. And strangely, that became part of his legend. As Harry Luck, the smooth-talking mercenary chasing treasure instead of justice, Dexter played the opportunist of the seven, the man who didn't show up for glory but ended up dying for something greater. Off-screen, the line between character and actor wasn't so far apart. Born Boris Mitchell Soso in Nevada in 1917 to Serbian immigrant parents, Dexter was no stranger to reinvention. He boxed, performed on radio, and served in the U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II before Hollywood ever learned his name. He changed it, as many did, to something sharper, more marketable. Brad Dexter sounded like a leading man, and for a time, he tried to be one. The Magnificent Seven gave him visibility, but unlike McQueen or Bronson, stardom never quite followed. While his co-stars rode the wave of fame into decades of leading roles, Dexter's face remained familiar, his name less so. But he was more than just a supporting actor. He was a man who moved quietly in powerful circles. In 1964, he saved Frank Sinatra from drowning in Hawaii. Not in a film, in real life. He dragged Sinatra and another woman out of the surf and held them above water for nearly an hour. He received a medal from the Red Cross, but the moment cost him more than it gave. When he later advised Sinatra not to marry Mia Farrow, the friendship collapsed. In the shadows of Hollywood, loyalty often meant silence. Dexter transitioned into producing in the 1970s, working behind the scenes and fading from the spotlight. He married multiple times, but had no children. In his final years, he battled emphysema, a slow and cruel thief of breath. On December 12, 2002, he died at the age of 85 in California. He once joked, "I'm the one from the Magnificent Seven nobody remembers." But legends aren't always loud. Some ride behind the others, quiet and steady, until the end. When the Magnificent Seven first galloped onto the screen in 1960, it wasn't just another Western. It was a hymn to doomed heroes. A symphony of gunfire, honor, and sacrifice. 7 men rode into danger not for glory, not for money, but for something they couldn't name, and perhaps didn't believe in until the very end. And the actors who gave them life? They carried that weight off-screen too. They came from every corner of the world: Russia, Indiana, Nebraska, New York, Berlin. Some were already stars. Others were clawing their way up. But for one brief moment, they stood shoulder to shoulder in the dust and heat, immortalized in celluloid. The world saw them as legends. What the world didn't see were the battles they fought when the cameras stopped. Addiction, illness, fading fame, forgotten names. Yel Brynner led with gravitas, yet died warning the world of the habit that killed him. Steve McQueen outran everything, until the one thing he couldn't. James Coburn weathered years of pain in silence before roaring back with an Oscar. Charles Bronson became a symbol of raw vengeance, but withered in the shadows of disease. Robert Vaughn was the last man standing, the final echo of a generation now gone. Horst Buchholz shined bright, faded quietly, and died in the same city that birthed him. And Brad Dexter, the one no one remembered, left behind a life that had touched more than any headline ever told. They were 7. Now they are ghosts, but not forgotten. Their stories remind us that heroes aren't just born on battlefields or conjured from scripts. Sometimes, they're just men, flawed, tired, proud, doing the right thing for reasons they may never fully understand. And that's why we still watch, still remember, still wonder, what does it really mean to be magnificent? If this story moved you, if these men and their legacies still ride through your memory, then subscribe to this channel, because there are more tales to tell, more legends to remember, and more ghosts waiting in the wings.